The things we do to keep someone alive can really hurt people.
What do you think allows someone to have a peaceful death?
Education and talking about it, you can control, and those things can help you have a more peaceful death. And sometimes the elephant was your loved one's dying, and no matter what we do, they're going to die, and they're probably going to die here. We're just not saying anything about it.
You say that you know the signs if someone is in their last legs and they are dying.
They'll have changes in breathing. They usually will have some kind of gurgly noise. There'll be some changes in skin color, sometimes changes in skin temperature, and it's a very distinct look. And out of nowhere, because he doesn't speak, he grabbed her hand and said, "I know, she's already come to me and told me she had." And it was this huge being, like as big as a car, behind her bed, wings tucked behind itself. It didn't say anything. It just sort of gave me this feeling of power, kind of like, she's mine.
In your experience, do you think that the person is able to hear their loved one?
We do think biologically the hearing is the last sense to go. So I always say,
why do you think humans are so scared of dying?
Man, what a question.
Julie, thank you so much for coming on today. I want to start by asking you, what made you want to become a hospice nurse?
What made me originally become a hospice nurse and take that plunge is being an ICU nurse. So I was an intensive care unit nurse for many years, maybe 8. I think I've been a nurse for 16 total, and it's been about half and half now. And I think because of my time in the ICU and my years of experience there, it still took me many years to leave the ICU, even though I was very unhappy working in the ICU, like around year 2. So don't do what I did. Don't wait as long as I did, but I waited. And then eventually I just was like, because of my experience there, I was like, there has to be a different thing I can do, a different type of nursing. I am seeing that people are going to die. Not all the time. I mean, no, all the time. I mean, in the ICU, we do wonderful things where we keep people alive, but I also saw a lot of death there, and a lot of us not talking about the fact that these patients were going to die. And I was just like, if this is the case, there has to be a better way to do this. Like, I don't want to be a part of this. And that got me thinking about hospice. And then it took me a bunch of years to finally just take the plunge.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what you saw in the ICU and explain for people that don't know what the ICU is?
Yeah. So the ICU is a place where people are very critically ill, and we are trying to keep them alive. Generally speaking, we are keeping them alive until their body hopefully starts getting better, and then they can get out of the ICU, go to a lower level of care in the hospital to eventually be discharged home well. Maybe into a rehab or something until they are fully well, back to normal, right? Back to what they were like before going into the hospital. So that's what we're trying to do. But what I saw, and we could do that very well many times, but there was also a population of people, either because of their age, their comorbidities, different things that have happened to them. They were just having complication after complication after complication in the ICU. Or people who would bounce back to the ICU, meaning they left the ICU and then they were on a different unit for a while, and then something happened where they had to come back to the ICU again. They got like sick again because they got some kind of infection. And those are the people that really pulled up my heartstrings that I didn't expect to see there that often, where I just saw so many people who couldn't get out of the ICU, who weren't getting better. And what I saw was that we as a healthcare system, at least back then, I still think it's probably pretty much the same, maybe a little different, hopefully, but we weren't great at explaining that to the families and explaining that to the patient if they were lucid enough to understand. We really just sort of put our blinders on and like stayed in our lane. And our lane was, we're going to just keep doing everything we possibly can to make sure, or at least try to keep them alive. And we sort of missed the mark on letting families understand that like that might actually not happen though. And if it's not going to happen, what's that going to look like? What are their options? Can their loved ones be taken off machines? And if they are, will they die here? Will they die at home? We just didn't talk about it. And for the most part. And it was after a couple of years of me being there as an ICU nurse that I finally had the courage to be the one I was the one who started speaking up. Hey, can we have a family meeting? Can we all get together with the family and talk about, end stage goals, what's really going to happen, like the big picture here? And what I found was it just took one voice. Everyone was thinking it, but no one knew how to say it or didn't know they were supposed to say it. So then I started feeling really empowered, like, oh, wow, all I have to do is be the one to say something. Um, and I'm not wrong. People are agreeing with me. People do think we need to have these family meetings and talk about end of life. No one was just saying anything. Um, and that's how I sort of transitioned. But that it was a lot like that. It was like we were no one wanted to say the elephant in the room. And sometimes the elephant was your loved one's dying. And no matter what we do, they're going to die. And they're probably going to die here. We're just not saying anything about it.
In your book, Nothing to Fear, something really stuck out to me. You were talking about your time as a nurse in the ICU, and you were saying how, the job of the people in the ICU is to keep the patient alive at all costs. And there was one time where I think they were just kind of like amputating fingers and toes and God knows what off this person because it was just about keeping them alive, even though the quality of their life is going to be a lot worse. And as you kind of mentioned, they're not going to be alive for much longer anyway. So it takes away the dignity of someone dying peacefully and intact rather than just doing what you can to give them an extra couple of weeks or a month, which might be, so uncomfortable for them. Can you talk about that?
Right. Yes. Yes. So the things we do to keep someone alive can really hurt people, right? So, like for an example, I think in the example I said in the book is, someone comes in to get a type of surgery for pancreatic cancer, which is a known very deadly terminal cancer. I could, usually most of the time. So this person already has that type of cancer, right? So they already don't have their life is already shortened because of that. Then they come in for this surgery. Then the surgery goes wrong and there's tons of complications. This person ends up in the hospital in the ICU. We're trying to keep this person alive, so they're on multiple machines, multiple medications. Many of those medications are vasoconstricting, which means we constrict their blood vessels to keep their organs like making sure their organs are getting all the blood, right? But that means we're risking their extremities from getting a lot of blood circulation, which means their extremities start to die off. So you'll see dead, meaning black, necrotic toes and fingers because we are constricting their blood so they can get it to the organs so they can survive. But the cost is they lose their fingers and toes, right? So, and because we're doing it for so long, this person will end up having to lose their fingers and their toes, right? And at the end of the day, they still have pancreatic cancer, which they had never gotten chemo or radiation from because they haven't gotten better from their surgery. And something like that is not it's not like, oh, that rarely happens. No, that happens a lot. This type of scenario that I'm explaining happened a lot in the ICU, and it's not anyone's fault. I think our part as a healthcare system is that we lacked the ability to explain this to the patient and their families so they could understand the progression of what was happening and what their next steps could and should be, right? It might not necessarily be that they are going to get out of the ICU anymore and that they're going to have a quality of life. And if you know that, what do you want? What do you want to do? I think we miss the mark a lot because we're I don't know if it's fear, we're afraid to be honest, we're afraid we're wrong. We don't want to take the hope away, right? So we just don't say anything.
Why do you think humans are so scared of dying?
Man, what a question. I mean, I get it. I think it's the great unknown. And our medicine, has gotten so so advanced and so wonderful that we have lived longer. We have been able to help people get over cancers and certain diseases or accidents or strokes, right? Where they actually do end up living longer and and having a good quality of life. So I think there's that too, where we've taken death out of the home and put it more into a hospital setting. Back in the day, people would die at home all the time. Children would, not that we want this, but like, people would lose children more often than they do now. People would have people dying in their homes. If they knew they were dying, they'd have the wakes in their homes. They wouldn't take them to a mortuary. The funeral would be there, the wake would be there. The community would kind of come around the family whose loved one just died. They'd put like black drapery over their house, so like the community knew, hey, these people just had a family member die, like let's go help them. So I think it was a little more in our eyesight, maybe 100 or 150 years ago, whereas now it's been very medicalized. So it seems like death might not happen to us, and which causes, I think, even more fear. When in
Mm,
reality, we do all die. And from my experience, the more we understand that and accept that, the less we actually will fear it,
mm,
even though it seems like the opposite. But I think, generally speaking, it's just the great unknown. It's the biggest unknown in life.
mm.
So even though my book is called Nothing to Fear, and I really do believe that, I still do a caveat in the first few pages being like, listen, I know it's not really nothing to fear. It's more like normal to fear. And just because we fear it doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it and learn
Mm.
about it and understand it.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with the great unknown. I mean, any situation in life when it's uncertain brings nerves to a person or anxiety to a person because we don't know the outcome. And as humans, we get stability from the known. We know for children, giving them routine, them knowing that, they're doing these things every day allows them to have stability and certainty in their life. And that's how humans thrive. So when you're telling
Exactly.
people who have all different religious opinions and beliefs, spiritual people, atheist people, there's a million things that people believe, yet no one actually knows the correct answer because no one has actually died for a long period of time and then, come back onto the earth to be able to tell us properly. We don't know, right? The closest thing is, near-death experiences. And I think that is it. I think that is completely correct. We don't know, and that's what brings us a lot of fear. And I think a lot of people might also have comfort in themselves dying, but being very scared of the people that they love around them dying. I think sometimes that can be more scary than dying ourselves, and I'm sure you've experienced that.
Yes, that's one of the main things I hear from my patients and their families and from people who follow me. They'll say it's not so much me dying, it's me leaving my children or my children dying or not seeing my children again. A lot of fear around children, which makes sense. Again, yeah, people love black and white, including me. It feels so much safer to live in this black and white space of like, we know what this is and what to do and how to do it. And death and dying, the process of it is very gray. It's a very gray area, which can make you feel really out of control, which can feel really scary.
Mm. Talk to us about what a hospice is and how it's different to palliative care. Because I remember when my grandma died, and she was, I think she was like 92 or something, and she went into palliative care. So I myself had experienced that to an extent and seen what they did and that. And she was in one that was very good. What is different about a hospice?
So at least in the U.S., which I do want to I do think it could be different. So in the
Yes.
U.S., a hospice is fully funded by Medicare, which means the government pays for hospice. So all hospices in the US should be basically acting the same and providing the same type of care, unless you are getting your money from elsewhere, like a private donor or something, right? So I say that because they all should be acting the same, although they don't, but they should be technically because they're getting their money from Medicare. And hospice is an end of life program, meaning like you have to have someone say that you have a terminal illness with less than 6 months to live. And you get a bunch of quote unquote things, free healthcare in your home. So people come, nurses, doctors, home health aides come into your home and provide care there. You can get a hospital bed in your home, oxygen, medications, things delivered, supplies, all in your home, all for free, provided by Medicare. But you lose things, right? You're not supposed to go back to the hospital anymore. You can't get chemo, radiation, PET scans, MRIs. You like anything to do with your terminal diagnosis, you can no longer quote unquote treat. You can
Mm.
still get like infections treated and things not to do with your diagnosis, but nothing with your terminal diagnosis. So that's a very, I could go on and on, but that's like
Yes.
a general information about hospice. Palliative care is like that ish, except it's more of a symptom management program. So you usually do have some kind of like life limiting illness. Maybe it's not quite terminal yet, but something that you may end your life eventually sometime, right? Like COPD is like a lung disorder that you can live with for a very long time, but you could have a lot of symptoms from that disease. So being on palliative care will really be helpful because palliative care will solely focus on you as a whole. So like it'll big picture ideas and managing those symptoms that come and go with a disease that's like chronic and life limiting. And I always say, if you could ever get on palliative care, like if someone offers you palliative care, I always say go for it 100%, no questions asked. Like there's literally no downside, at least in the US, to be on palliative care. Now, like hospice, like I said, you quote unquote lose things, right? You're not supposed to go into the hospital anymore. You're not supposed to get like PET scans or CT scans. But with palliative care, you get all of that stuff. You can still do all of those things and get people to help you manage with the most difficult symptoms of the disease. So it's really nice.
Yeah. In my
Yeah.
understanding of palliative care, and this is not in all situations, but I think like maybe 90%. If you're in palliative care, like again, using the example of my grandma, she had had a stroke. She was 92, and then she just kind of was going downhill, and she was in there for a couple of weeks before she passed. You are not going to most times leave palliative care like the ones in Australia. If you've gone into palliative care, it's pretty much like that's the last stage. I don't know if that's similar in the States.
No, I would say we try to really differentiate the two. With palliative care, you can come off palliative care and you don't go to a place. It's like a group of doctors and nurses that help manage a symptom, usually in the hospital. You're
Oh,
not hospitalized, but they usually don't come to you. Sometimes they can come to you, but it's not someone like going to a place.
yeah,
They are just being seen by people to help manage symptoms. So instead of your symptoms being like up and down roller coaster, they can help you kind of plateau out so you can have a good quality of life.
yeah. I think it
Um,
might be
a
slightly
lot.
different in Australia. I'm like
Yes,
just
that's
I
what I
think
have heard. They're in the
yeah.
UK. The palliative
Yeah, I
care is a
think
little
it
different.
is end of life in Australia where, I don't know if you probably some instances stay in the hospital, I'm not sure, but you go to an area, like usually hospitals have another like building or something, and that will be the palliative care, and usually you go in, you ain't coming out, so that's,
Yes.
yeah, that sort of is what it is similar. Like that's how I kind of know of it, but I might not be 100% right. I want to ask you, when you have had your time obviously you still work as a hospice nurse, but working there. You say that you know the signs if someone is, in their last legs and they are dying like a week out or a couple of days out. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes. So most people will go through, specifically if they're like dying a natural death, which is like anyone who's just not taking, like your grandmother, even if they're in palliative care, not hospice, right? We're not doing any kind of interventions really to quote unquote keep them alive. Our bodies have built-in mechanisms that can help us die and like kind of systematically shut down. So our bodies are doing that, right? And if you're around it enough, you start seeing the same patterns happen in almost everybody. In the last phase of life, it's called actively dying. And that's the most distinct phase. All the rest of the phases are like very gray, like I was talking about. Very gray. You're not exactly sure where the person is as far as like timeline goes. But the actively dying phase, the one good thing about it, I guess, would be that it's very black and white. It's like pretty easy to see. And almost everyone looks like this, which is fully unconscious. So, not waking up, fully unconscious. They are not eating and drinking anymore. Their eyes and mouth will usually be open, and that's only because it takes a lot of muscle to keep your mouth closed and you keep your eyes closed. So their mouth might be open, their eyes might be a little open, but like not making eye contact, right? They'll have changes in breathing purposely, not because they're struggling to breathe, but because their body is metabolically changing and it's making them breathe different. They usually will have some kind of gurgly noise, which doesn't mean it's like coming from, a lot of people will associate that with like, oh, they're drowning on fluids. This is hard. And really, it's just a little bit of saliva in the back of their mouth that is not being swallowed because their brain's not telling their body to swallow it. So it creates this like gurgling noise. There'll be some changes in skin color, sometimes changes in skin temperature, and it's a very distinct look. And if you're around it all the time, you kind of know what it looks like. And hey, this is the actively dying phase. And as a hospice nurse to tell their loved ones, like, this is how much time this person likely has left, which is usually anywhere. I always give ranges, a few hours to a few days. Sometimes it's like a week, but it's usually a few days. And it's the biggest thing I try to educate about, and I actually show real life videos of this on my channels, and I get a lot of heat from people and from the channels because they say it's inappropriate, and I really push back and say, this is the problem. Everyone's saying it's inappropriate when really this is the most natural thing ever, and the person's not suffering. We just don't know what it looks like. And if you don't know what it looks like, it can be really scary. And then add to that, it's your loved one. It's your loved one. They look different. They're not responding to you. They're breathing differently. If you don't know what the heck this is, you're going to think they are suffering. You're going to think this is horrible. Why isn't someone doing something? And that's what I heard back all the time on my channel. People writing to me and saying, why didn't someone do something? My loved one was suffering. They looked like this. They sounded like this. And I realized, oh my gosh, no one knows that this is like a normal part of death and dying.
In your experience, do you think that the person is able to hear their loved ones? And I ask that again, going back to my late grandma. I will never forget my dad telling me this story. Is quite funny that him and his oldest brother, who's actually passed now, um, they weren't bickering, but they were kind of having words. And my uncle was like really annoying my dad, and my grandma had been like completely out of it, right? And then she looks at my uncle and she says, "Stop annoying your brother." And that was like the last words that she said. And then she died a couple of days later. But she went from like just out of it to obviously hearing them, telling my uncle to stop annoying my dad, and then like died. So
Yes.
it made
Yeah.
me think that's still in that state. At times that they are able to hear, but I'd love to know what your experience is.
We do think biologically the hearing is the last sense to go and that people can still hear us even if they're not fully responding. So I always say, talk to them like they're still in the room. don't talk about them, like they can't hear you. So we do think that, like scientifically, that people can actually hear us to some extent, right? I don't think they're fully aware, fully conscious. But then I love those moments where people surprise us. I hear that all the time. We're just little surprises, right? Where she's still the mom and she can kind of wake up for a moment and say, "Hey, quit it." Right? That's a great last word story. Quit
I
annoying your
know.
brother. Classic. Classic.
Good for my dad to take. See,
Yeah, right?
mum told
Yeah,
us.
right? He's
I'd
never
love
gonna live
to
that down now.
exactly. I'd
Yeah.
love for you to tell us a bit about your experience with people that are dying, and also, I'm sure you've dealt with children who are dying too, and some final moment stories, if any stick out to you, ones that um, were able to give you grace and kind of like fill your heart.
Oh my gosh, yes. So one, just to be totally transparent, I have not been with dying children. I only do adults, so 18 and
Yes.
above. Of course, having an 18-year-old, which I have had 18-year-olds, is still to me a child
Mm.
and devastating and sad and hard and all the things. But I do want to be totally transparent that I do not do pediatric hospice. I haven't done that. And I'll give one story, but I just want to say that there are, I mean, honestly, I have hundreds of stories in the sense of they all might not be super magical, right? These are big, elaborate stories, but watching anyone at the end of life, for the most part, is pretty amazing just because you see the love between the family and the patient and the friends, and it's not as sad as people think. I mean, it's really a beautiful, beautiful thing. And like any little tiny interaction is like it's been one of my greatest gifts. I always say that. My job is truly like the greatest gift of my life thus far is working as a hospice nurse. I mean that. So with that said, stories that stick out. Okay, so I'll do one. Actually, both of these are in my book, but that's okay. I'll do one that I love because it's so simple, but I think it matters so much. So I went to go see a patient who wasn't even my patient. He was a fellow nurse who just needed a quick follow up on a patient who wasn't close to dying yet, and she just needed some help. Like, can you just go see this patient? Everything's fine. He's super chill. Family's great. Like, he just needs a visit this week. I'm like, great, no problem. So I go there and he's laying in bed. He's super funny, like making jokes. His wife's there, his daughter's there, some grandkids are there. Actually, I think a couple daughters were there and grandkids were there. They were all hanging out. It was great. And I thought, this is so lovely. Like, it's so nice. I'm so glad they're here. I'm so glad they're letting like young kids around their dying grandpa, because I think that's important too, to like not hide death. And like halfway through my visit, out of nowhere, he suddenly changed. Boom, like on a dime. This does not happen that often, but it does happen where someone will be he was getting close to the end of life, but definitely not anywhere near I thought that he would like die anytime soon anyway. But at this visit, he suddenly went unconscious and had changes in breathing. Like boom. And I could tell, wow, okay, I think he's actively dying now. Which I did not say that out loud, but I did tell the family. I noticed that I said, "Can you guys come in here? I want to show you something." And I started showing. Do you see how he's suddenly unconscious? How he has these changes in breathing? This is a really big change. I think he may die soon. Please, like, get everyone in here now. And that could be a cause for panic for most people, right? I was ready for the family to freak out because their dad, their husband, the grand, he was not there just a few minutes ago. But instead, on a dime, it gives me chills just talking about it. The wife gets in bed with him, lays next to him, like her head's on his shoulder. His children are around him, like, Dad, we love you. Dad, we love you. Grandkids in there. Grandpa, we love you. Grandpa, we love you. It makes me cry every time because the wife said, "Thank you for being so easy to love. Thank you for being so easy to love. We love you. Thank you for being so easy to love." And they just weren't even weeping. I mean, it was like they were just somehow ready. And he took his last breath before I left that day, that visit. I couldn't believe it, and it makes me cry every time because I think like, wow, that could have gone so differently. They could have been I've seen it gone differently, and I wouldn't have blamed it either if they did, if they were shaking him and, "Dad, wake up. What's going on?" Like freaking out, and no one did that. No one. They flipped on a dime just like him and got in bed with him and just had this most beautiful moment ever. This beautiful last moment with their dad, with their husband, with their grandfather, and that was it. And I left there being like, I want everyone to know that this is how it can be if you, I think, prepare yourself enough. So I think the difference is like they knew he was going to die. They were kind of ready. They were there. They were like staring it in the face every day by being there a lot, by having the grandkids around, by talking about his death. Because I had heard from the nurse who was there all the time that they were really prepared, that they were ready, that they understood what was going to happen. Right. And I think understanding it and knowing it and trying to really talk about it and get into acceptance can lead to those moments where
Mm.
if something happens real quick, you can get in this space of like, yeah, just peace. And I'm sure they had difficult moments afterwards because I'm sure it was a shock, and it's still hard to lose someone, but it was so beautiful. It
Mm.
was so beautiful, and especially when it happened so quickly. And that's just one story, Sarah. There are so many stories that are different than that in a different way, but just beautiful experiences that I feel so grateful that I get to witness.
I think you touched on something which is super interesting to talk about, and that's like not hiding death from children. I remember I talked to a child educator on this podcast a while ago, and she had worked as a death doula, I think, for a period of time. And she had said the same thing like, it is important for a child to go to a funeral. It is important for a child to experience that. And I remember, I mean, my kids are 10 and 12 now, so a little bit older. They're not like babies. But thinking that as well, like, oh, I shouldn't take them to this, or I don't want them to be traumatized for the rest of their life or something like that. But it seems that that is not the case. And I remember, I mean, this is very different. It's not a human, but I remember last year our dog died and we were obsessed with our dog and we had her for 15 and a half years. And I think the hardest thing for me was having to tell the kids that we were about to put her down that night. And they were like devastated. But, thank God that they got to see a dog die before anyone else that's important in their life. They got to experience grief through an animal. And then we took them to the vet where we all stayed in the room when she got put down. And I mean, I think a lot of people wouldn't do that because they'd think it was traumatizing, and it was full on. I was holding her to have 15 and a half years see her, but it
Mhm.
was beautiful. We got to hug each other, we got to cry. And so I would love you to talk to that.
Yes, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. I couldn't agree more, and I feel like, I mean, this is a whole nother podcast, but like, losing a dog, losing a pet is losing something so huge. Which I know that's not the point of your question, but I just wanna say that to you,
Yes.
because I think it is a great, 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 great loss. And many people who vision, by the way, at the end of life, when they see dead relatives, then not everyone sees dead relatives or dead loved ones. They see dead pets. So
Wow.
pets even come to people when they're dying, which I think is amazing. I think that we need to do more of that. Like I said, 100, 150 years ago, children were seeing death much more than they are now because grandpa died in the house, and their mom was taking care of grandpa while he died, and the funeral was there and the wake was there. And I think we don't just shove them into the room and go, here's your dead loved one dying,
Yeah.
right? We talk about, I think it's the way we present it, right? We talk about it. It's a normal part of life. It can feel scary, it can feel sad, and guess what? Nothing is wrong with things feeling scary and sad. That is an
Mm.
appropriate emotion for these things, right? I think we, including me, want everyone to feel good all the time and like not have any kind of uncomfortable emotions, and anything that's going to make you a little uncomfortable must be bad. And that's a misconception, right? So it's like, um I think it's just talk about it. I love the fact, I mean, not to keep talking about your situation, but like that your kids got to see you grieving and mourning, your animal, just like they
Mm.
were. Like that's an appropriate response for their mom to be feeling when their dog is dying. And get to see you then, like them seeing you being comfortable with sharing that,
Yes, it's
I
so
think gives them permission to go, "Oh,
yes.
this is really sad.
I
I can cry too."
I'm so happy you say that, Julie, because I think I'm the opposite to a lot of people that like friends that I've spoken to because I know that they try to hide their crying. And I cry the older I get, I'm so empathetic. I cry at the drop of a hat. And when it comes to loved ones, I am like crying. My friend's dad died, and I could not stop crying, like because I was crying for her pain, right? And so when my
Yeah.
dog died, I think I cried for 2 weeks. I mean, I think about it now, I'm about to cry. Like I just love so much. When I love with all my heart. But I also they have seen me crying. They saw me grieving. They cried, and I'm really happy you say that because there was a part of me that thought maybe I shouldn't cry so much around them. But I suppose that they see how much you love, and they see that it's all right to show emotion as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's not total like, right, like, I guess we should have a therapist on to tell us
Yeah. Yes.
what we should think, but, like, to me, from my experience anyway, with around death and dying, the more you are like that, the more open you are, the more, like, willing you are to say the truth. Oh gosh, this is the more willing you are to say the truth, even if the truth is, "I don't want to die. I am pissed. I'm afraid." Even if that's really hard to say to some, I'm not saying to say that to your young children. I just
Yeah,
mean, like, to say the truth of the matter. You will be light years ahead of most people, and you will live better and you will die better for it. That is what I have seen. So there's something about showing up in the moment truthfully and honestly, whether that means crying, whether that means just saying the truth of like how you feel. There's something that it connects us all when someone does that. It's like when one person can do it, it gives us permission to be able to also do it. And I think
totally.
as far as children go, I think it's good for children to see that in other people because they will mirror what they see, you know?
Mm, I agree. I'd love to talk
Yeah.
about death visioning. You've experienced that, and I've heard a lot of stories around that. And I want to just tell you the two stories that I've heard. And one came. This is people that before they die, they experience their loved ones coming, who have died, coming to almost take them across to the other side, or as you said, also animals. And there was a famous Holocaust survivor called Elie Wiesel, and
Mhm.
he has this beautiful story that he shared, and he actually didn't even end up dying then. He's dead now, but he had gone in, I think, for some sort of heart surgery or some full-on surgery. I suppose it was a little bit like a near-death experience, and his whole family had perished in the Holocaust. And he said that he saw his mother and his father and his sister had all come to him to help him, like say, like we're here, and it gave him so much comfort. I mean, he was an old man; he hadn't seen them since he was young. He couldn't believe it. And what was so beautiful about the story was not just seeing that. He said, "I had never spoken about my sister. She was." A child when she died in the Holocaust. It was so painful that he could never talk about the death of his sister, his younger sister. And he said she had come to him, at this moment. And so he was like, he actually ended up surviving. And he went on to live quite a few more years. But he said he was not scared of dying because he had seen these people, that his most loved ones, and he knew that they would be there for him. And there was another beautiful story that I heard. A friend of mine, Leslie Keane, she wrote she was the journalist in a very well-known documentary called Surviving Death. And within that documentary, she, did a lot of stories about people dying. And one was this sweet, sweet girl who was, 10 or 11, and she had a brain tumor and she was dying. And her mother didn't know how many, weeks or days she had left, and she was at home. And one day her mother walked past her room and heard her talking. She was in her room by herself. And then a few hours later, she said to her daughter, who are you talking to? And her daughter said, Mum, I was talking to Mother Mary. She came to me. And it's such a beautiful story. And then she ended up dying like 2 days later, the girl. And her mum's like, I knew that she would be okay because Mother Mary had come to her. And that's when I knew that she was going to go soon. So, I mean, so many beautiful stories, heartbreaking but beautiful.
Mhm.
But I'd love you to tell us your experience with deathbed visioning.
Yeah, so deathbed visioning is a thing that happens at the end of life to many, many people. I always clarify this by saying when I first became a hospice nurse, I was a little bit like, what? Like, what is this? Because I was so surprised that we had it in like our educational packets for families. Like a part of death and dying is deathbed visioning. And I remember thinking like, I cannot believe as like healthcare workers, we are educating about this. I just thought it seemed irresponsible or something until you start doing it long enough and then like you see how often it happens that it's like, oh, you have to talk about it because people think they're losing their minds or they think their loved one needs to be medicated, they're hallucinating, something's wrong, right? And we don't know why it happens. It does. And it's just usually like a few weeks before someone dies is when they start visioning, and they will have experiences where it feels very real life from what they tell me, where they see their loved ones. So sometimes it's their grandparents or an uncle or parents or a sister or a pet that comes in and says stuff like, you're not going yet, but we're going to come back and get you. Don't worry. Like, we'll take care of you. Everything's going to be fine. And it's always really, really comforting. And honestly, it happens so much during my work that like I do have a few stories that stick out, but like
Please
it's
tell
so
us.
often that it tell us you want
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I'll give you one. Okay. So let's see. This one's not in my book. Okay, this one's not in my book. Um so an elderly man, he's bedbound, not really talking, which is very normal for Alzheimer's disease. So he's barely talking. When he does, he doesn't make any sense, right? His wife comes in and her and I are talking, and he is just sort of sitting there, like kind of staring at us pleasantly. And then I'll say like one word things to him, like, how are you doing today? And he's able to like shake his head, like yes or no. And then all of a sudden he drifted off and started staring up in the corner of the room and would get this big smile on his face. Um, and not say anything, but just be staring at something. And I even went to the point where I was like, um, snapping in front of his face to be like, hello, like snap out of it. And he would not snap out of it until he was ready. And then he'd look at us again and we would be talking and he wouldn't say much. Okay. So I leave the room to go talk to the wife to say, hey, that's not deathbed visioning, but it's called the death stare. But it is an indicator that someone could be dying soon. So I took her out to the room to say, hey, he's doing this thing called the death stare. And it's wonderful. And he appears to be looking at something very beautiful. But just so you know, that usually indicates that it may be dying soon. And I wanted to give you a heads up. And she goes, oh, girl, he's been doing much more than that. The other day I asked him who he was seeing, and he said, and he doesn't really speak, but that day he said, Jesus, I've been seeing Jesus. And my sister died a few weeks ago, and I didn't want to tell him because we were all really close. And um, we were all really close, and he has Alzheimer's. He's going to forget anyway. So I didn't really want to make him sad and then have to like retell him over and over again that she died. He's going to forget, blah, blah, blah. So I just didn't tell him. And she goes, Um, but then later, I felt guilty, so I went in and I sat down and I looked at him and I said, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you this, but so and so had died." And out of nowhere, because he doesn't speak, he grabbed her hand and said, "I know. She's already come to me and told me she had died. She said she's coming to get me." This man, and the fact that it's mind blowing that he said, "I know she already came to me and told me and said she's coming to get me soon." That's mind blowing in itself. But the fact that he even can speak, like he doesn't really speak, right? So,
Wow.
and I was just, and my mouth's on the floor now because I'm like, was not ready for this. And she goes, "I know." She goes, "So Julie, I'm okay. I'm okay. He can go. Like whenever he's ready, he can go." And he did. He died a few days later. Um, and that's just one story, right? But I mean, I have countless stories of, families calling me frantic. "You have to come here. Our father's hallucinating. Something's wrong with him." And I get there and he's totally fine and acting very lucid. And then when they leave the room, he grabbed me and was like, "Hey, they think I'm crazy, but I'm not. My parents came to me last night. They were clear as day. They came to me last night and said, 'It's not my time yet, but they're coming for me soon.'" And I said, "How do you feel about that?" And he said, "I feel okay. I feel comforted, but they think I'm crazy." Meaning his family, right? And I was like, "Listen, I'll talk to them. I'm glad you had that experience. It's called visioning. It's very normal. Like as long as it's comforting to you, don't worry about it." And then I went into the hallway and of course the family grabs me and whispering, "He's going crazy. He's seeing his loved ones. His parents have been dead for 20 years. I don't know what he's talking about." Um, and it's just a matter of education, just a matter of education. So it's a lot of that. It's not necessarily always catching it in the moment, right? It's more families saying stuff like, "Help us, something's wrong,"
Mm.
and educating them about, this is a normal thing.
And you said that in your book that 80% of the time deathbed visioning happens.
Yes. And it's really easy so one, yes, that's what like I've gotten like anecdotal and statistical things just for the book, right? So I could figure that out. But also if you start asking people, you will see how often it happens. Like a lot of nurses don't ask because it's not really our forte, right? We're more there to like help with pain control and talk about medical issues. Um, but if you mention that visioning is a thing that happens at the end of life, I am telling you, 9 times out of 10, it's already happening. People
Mm.
already go, "That's already happened. He's already said something like that. I've already heard him talking to his brother who died, 2 years ago," or whatever.
There must be something so
So,
comforting in that, though. Like if you know that you're dying and then you get a vision of someone that you've loved. And I remember you saying in your book that it's never people you don't like going, "Hey, the
yeah.
mean relative that's come back to get you that you hated." It's never that. It's always people that you loved that come back. There must be something so comforting in knowing that you're going to go, but they're going to be there. I think that's so beautiful.
That's what I think too. There's a lot of stuff about death and dying that is so beautiful. And not just metaphysical things, even the biology of death to me is so beautiful.
You mentioned the death stare. Talk to us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, so like you were saying, in my book, chapter 6 is all about the deathbed phenomena that happens, and it's my longest chapter because there's so much of it. One of the things is called the death stare, and it's like what I was saying in that first story where someone could be either making eye contact with you or even talking to you and like having a full conversation and then all of a sudden they stop talking to you and they'll gaze off, usually to the corner or to the ceiling, and they will have this intense stare that they will not snap out of. It's almost like they're in another realm, another dimension. Sometimes the death stare, that's the death stare, will go into the death reach, which means then they reach up, they're staring at this thing, then they'll reach up to the thing they're staring at. Sometimes that leads to visioning where they say like, "Hi, mom," or "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm seeing you here. What are you doing here?" Um, things like that. So they sometimes go together, and sometimes you'll see them separately. But it's usually just a stare. It's like what it sounds like, a death stare.
Mm. And you've had your
Mhm.
own experience. I'd love you to talk to that about seeing things from the angelic realm.
Oh man, that story is such a wonderful story. The reason why I say "oh man" is because, for so many years I was so afraid to tell that story because of what people would think. But it starts out with me being, an admission nurse admitting someone onto hospice from the hospital. They were coming to their home, and when they arrived at their home, they were already actively dying. So they were already in that last phase of life. And this person was young and she had young children. Her children were like 20 something and she was probably 50 something. And that's always hard anyway. And she was actively dying, and I thought she would die like any minute. That's how close to death she looked. And we got her settled in the house. I talked to the kids. I try to educate them about educate them like, listen, unfortunately, like from what I'm seeing, I think your mother's going to die tonight and very soon. I'm going to try to hang out here while I finish my charting to basically be here when she dies. Just because I felt bad. It was like really hectic. They were not really prepared for this, right? So I was going to try to hang out as long as I could, thinking she would die very soon because of all the signs I was seeing. She had changes in breathing. She was cyanotic, which means like purple looking, blue looking. Definitely not like oxygen going to the brain. She was fully unconscious. Like I thought she was going to be taking her last breath like any moment. Okay. After about an hour and a half of being there and charting, she had not died yet and it was getting late. And that was okay, but I was like, okay, I'm going to have to eventually go. So I told the children, listen, I'm going to have to go, but when she does die, please give us a call. Someone will come back out here. We'll help you with all the mortuary plans, things like that. So just give us a call when she dies. And before I left, I wanted to do one last check on her. And I went into her room, and I remember putting my hands on her bed and kind of closed my eyes. And I'm not really a praying type, but I like closed my eyes and just sort of thought like, I wish you all the best. Like, I hope, I pray you have a peaceful death for herself and for her children. I remember thinking that. And then as I did that, I got this big flash of something in my mind. Okay. And I ignored it big time because I'm not someone who like sees angels, or like I said, I'm not even like a praying type. Right. So I saw this flash of a thing and I sort of just pushed it out of my brain and I went home and went about my night. The next morning, when I started work again, I looked at my emails and I didn't see any death visit emails. Usually, when someone dies overnight, the visiting nurse will send an email to the team saying, so and so died last night at X amount of time, this time, da 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 da. I didn't see that. So I was like, what happened? How come no one to go see this lady? So I called the office, like, hey, who did the death visit? What happened? And they were like, we didn't get a call. And my initial response as a nurse was like, "Ugh, they called 911. She's probably in the hospital. She's probably intubated. Like, no, we didn't do a good job." So I called the family to see like what had happened. Not one part of me was like, this lady would still be alive. Not one part of me. It'd be impossible in my mind for her to have made it through the night. And the son answers the call and he sounds like chipper and happy. And he was like, "Oh, hey, Julie. Yeah, no, the night was fine. Mom slept through the night. And when she woke up this morning, she said she was hungry and she wanted pancakes." And I'm like, "Your mom, what? Your mom woke up this morning?" you know? And he was like, "Yeah, she said she was hungry and wanted pancakes." Meanwhile, I hear laughing in the background. I hear like her daughter and her laughing together. And I'm like, "So what's going on?" He's like, "So we got her up and she's eating pancakes." And I could not hide my shock. Like, normally I can kind of keep it together, but I was like, I don't understand. Like, what? What do you mean? Your mom's awake? She's eating? And he's like, yeah, she's awake eating. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to come over. Because I was like, I got to see this for myself. I cannot believe this. And sure enough, there she is, awake, alert, oriented, fully back to life. Looks like a new person, eating pancakes, laughing with her children. And I thought it was like one of the other phenomenons that happened, which is called the death rally or terminal lucidity, where like someone has a burst of energy and then they die shortly after. So of course, like Debbie Downer, I tell everybody that I think this is just the burst of energy and like she's gonna die soon after this. It's like, oh my God, Julie, you're like not helping this family here. But I felt like it was my duty to be like, she's not going to live. This is crazy, but I'm happy she's here, but I think she's gonna die soon, right? Nope, she does not do that either. She lives very well for another 3 months, which is not long, but from what she looked like before, she lived a very beautiful 3 months with her children. And I only told that story for the longest time. I left out the angel part, which I'm about to say in a second. I just said it was a miracle. I don't know how it happened, but it was. I think it was a miracle. How beautiful, yada, yada. And then finally, years later, I was willing to say, the other part of the story, which was that flash in my mind that I saw the night before, right before I left, was this image of, I guess you could call it an angel. It was like an image that flashed into my mind, and it was this huge being, like as big as a car, but a car standing upright behind her bed. Behind her bed, it looked like kind of like a statue, I guess, with like I would say wings tucked behind itself. And it didn't say anything. It didn't really even acknowledge me. It just sort of gave me this feeling of power and kind of like, she's mine. I got this. Like this is mine, and this was her. Like kind of like almost implanting in my brain, like I've got this. She's mine. Um, and it just felt like power and strength. And it wasn't scary, but it definitely wasn't what I thought an angel would look like. It was not like warm and fuzzy and like a little baby cherub, like warm, soft, fuzzy. It was like powerful strength. Um, yeah, those are the two words that stick out: powerful and strength to me. And like hers, like almost like the property, she was the property of theirs, or like they were connected in some way.
Mm. Well, I suppose, like in the
And
mystical realm, they talk a lot about the fact, and if you believe this or not, I'm just telling you what I've heard, that we
yeah,
get given a guardian angel and a spirit guide, and they accompany you through your life, and sometimes they change over time. But your story sounds like that one of those, the angel, the spirit guide, was saying, I've got this. This is the person that I'm
yeah,
looking
like she's
after, and
mine.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and not like property, it didn't feel like that, but it was like,
no,
"She's mine,
no,
like, I've got this." And I even to this day, I feel a little strange telling the story because like I said, it's like I never try to hold very strict views of the world. I try to be open-minded, open-hearted, and even in the sense of, like, I've experienced this, but I'm open-minded and open-hearted enough to go, "But I don't really know," like, I don't really
mm,
know. I just know that the next day when she was eating pancakes, it made me think back to the moment before I left the house the night before and not poo-poo away that image that popped in my head. Initially I did. Initially, I knew what the image was when it first popped in my head, but I wasn't willing to believe it. I wasn't willing to go, that was an angel. I just ignored it like it didn't actually happen. And then the next day, though, when I saw her fully alert and oriented eating pancakes, I was like, huh, wow, okay.
mm,
Maybe that was an angel.
wow.
Maybe that was her angel. And I do regret, I didn't get the courage to say anything to her. I didn't get the courage to say anything to the kids, question them, ask them, did she say anything? Did she feel like something happened to her? I didn't say any of that. I kept it very much like nursing oriented those whole 3 months. Um, but it was still a really amazing thing to witness, all these years later.
What do you think allows someone to have a peaceful death?
I think a lot of things come into play, but one of the things that you can control, because some of the things are out of your control, one of the things you can control is talking about it. There is something about talking openly about it, even if it is, like I said, quote unquote negative, I don't want to die, I'm scared to die, I'm angry to die, even those things will help you along the way. I think learning about the progression of your specific disease, what to expect at the end of life will help you. So education and communication will help. Those are the two things you can control, right? Everything else, disease comes into play, age comes into play, family comes into play, and you can't always control those things. But, education and talking about it, you can control, and those things can help you have a more peaceful death.
Mm. From a religious perspective, what are some of the most beautiful things you've seen when people have been dying?
Ooh, from a religious perspective, I think religion doesn't seem to play that big of a role, but faith does.
Mm.
So faith in anything seems to help. So that could be something religious. It could be faith in like humanity, faith in the ocean or like energy. So any kind of faith in something seems to help. Um, I've seen some people that were very religious, not and because of that, it actually affected their death negatively. But then I've seen others where it has really, really helped having a faith in their religion has really, really helped. So I think it depends on the person a lot and their personality and their the way they believe in the religion and like how they've been indoctrinated into it. Um, seems to play a role.
Mm. And I suppose, when it comes down to it, how have you seen love? Um, how have you seen love being the guiding force at the end of people's lives with their family?
Yeah, it's the most beautiful thing. I feel like I see like love as a verb, love in action at the end of life because seeing people, even if they're just sitting there while their loved one is taking their last breaths or like while their loved one's actively dying, sitting in that uncomfortable space, and it usually is very uncomfortable for them, but they still do it. Like to witness that as me, as a third party witnessing it, is truly makes me like I can like weep every time I think about it because it's so beautiful. And it really helps me see like it gives me hope in the world, specifically now in our world. I feel like our world can really be like if you're looking at it on a global level, it can be so easy to go, what is going on? This feels horrible, right? And that's not true sometimes.
Mm.
But when you take it to an individual level and I get to see the love between friends or family at the end of life when it's so uncomfortable too, and their little world is so uncomfortable, but they show up anyway and they're still there and they do the hard things out of love, it like really restores my faith in humanity. And like I try to focus on those things to give me a better view of the world, if that makes sense, right? Instead of like looking at the world and trying to be like, is are we okay? It's like I look at these individuals and go, okay, if there's one of you, there's more of you. We can be okay.
There must be something very grounding in the work that you do. I mean, every day you're experiencing people losing their life, like they're dying, right? It must make you almost not sweat the small stuff, I imagine, as much because you realize, like, we're only here for a finite amount of time and things that would take up our mind space that are so insignificant when you really think about them. And then you see these cases every day of people and their loved ones, with them and, little fights that they may have had in the past or this or that, how irrelevant it could be when you're in the space of knowing that you're about to lose someone that you love and care for so much. I think there must be something so grounding in the work that you do.
Yes, I often say that. I truly do contemplate my death or my mortality on a daily basis, and it helps me live better.
Mm,
It sounds morbid, but to me, it's not. It's like truly knowing that I will. I'm definitely going to die, and not only am I going to die, I probably won't have my health forever. Um, and knowing that helps me appreciate the health that I have now, the
mm,
fact that I can taste coffee. I like how it smells. I feel thirsty. I I have an appetite. I want to walk around. Those little things that I see, we all and it's not about shaming someone who takes it for granted. It's easy to take it for granted. But when you're around death and dying so much and you truly understand that it will happen to you and everyone you love, instead of that being scary, I feel like it makes every day a gift.
Mm.
And I really mean that. I really mean that. And that is why I love my job so much and I'm so grateful for it because it has changed. It has changed my brain. It has changed the
Mm.
way I look at life. And for that, I feel like I've truly learned how to live in the day that I'm in, at a day at a time.
What's some of the best advice that you have ever been given?
I think I just touched on it a little bit. I mean, people always talk about deathbed regrets, and there are deathbed regrets. The one I don't hear talked about often enough and that I hear the most is not appreciating your health when you have it.
Mm.
That is the number one thing I hear my patients say in passing. They won't put it in a nice little bow and go, "My biggest regret is," right? But they'll say stuff like, "I wish I would have appreciated when I could taste this cheeseburger. I wish I would have appreciated it when I had an appetite." Those are two big things. Like they don't want to eat, or if they eat, it doesn't taste the same. And they're like, "I wish I would have appreciated this when I could really enjoy this." Or like, "I used to walk around the block every Thursday with my neighbor, and like now it's too hard to walk around the block. I wish I would have appreciated that neighbor and that walk. I didn't realize how important that was to me." It's things like that that kind of woke me up to like, "Oh yeah, it's so easy to take these little things for granted." And I really, really do try to not do that.
Mm.
Every single day, I have to remind myself, and I do, because that's the number one thing I hear is that, I wish I didn't, basically, not, I wish I didn't take my life for granted.
Mm. I think that's so pertinent. And I think about it a bit, and there's this beautiful quote by Robin Sharma, and it says that, health is the crown on the well person's head that only the sick person can see. And when I read that
Mm,
quote many years ago, I thought, God is so right. We don't we take our health for granted, forgetting that it's only the sick people that wish that they had what we had. Um, and so I think that advice that you've given Julie is really wonderful and one that we should all think about. I wonder, do you have a favorite prayer or saying or mantra?
Oh, I have so many. I am sober too, which I'm very open about. That's why I mention it. So, in the 12-step program that I'm in, there's tons of prayers that we say. One of it, one of them is the third step prayer. I'll only give one line just because it's kind of long, but
Mm.
relieve me of the bondage of self, so I may better do Thy will. I think I'm specifically kind of in this bondage of the brain, the bondage of the self, and asking God or my higher power to relieve me of that, so I can better do, my higher power's will. Or the serenity
Mm.
prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
What is something that you wish for yourself?
Mm, I feel like I have it all. Really. I mean, not always, but I wish that I can stay connected to, my higher power as much as possible in the day that I'm in, so I can remember that we are all connected, and the only thing that is really important is connected to my higher power, so I can connect to other individuals that I feel separate from, but I know I'm really not. And only in that disconnection is when I feel that dissatisfaction, that disease. So it's in practicing like remembering to remember that we're all connected,
Mm.
and that's the only thing I wish for myself always. Because I've learned over and over and over again. That's really the only thing that matters is
Mm.
remembering that we are all connected. We are all
Mm.
one. That is the only reason why we are here, in my opinion. Um, um, and that's the only thing that truly brings me peace.
Mm. It's beautiful. It really is.
Yeah.
And our final question, Julie, what is a life of greatness to you?
I think that's going to be different for everybody, but to me, a life of greatness would be to again stay connected to my higher power as much as I can, because I think in that state, that's my most truest form. And in my most truest form, um, I can connect most truthfully to other human beings that are here doing the same thing. There's
Mm.
something to me about like connection, and I feel like through truth we can connect. So and the way I can be truthful is by connecting to something greater than me. It's really hard for me to articulate, but something like that. Like a great life is continuously doing that, which will help me be of service to other people and connect to other people. And I think that's like the only thing there is in life ever.
Mm. Julie, thank you so much for all the work you do. Thank you for bringing what can be an uncomfortable and scary topic for a lot of people to the limelight, because it is important for us to learn and know more about it, because we're all going to go through it. And I am so grateful for the conversation today. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you so much. Wonderful meeting you, and have a beautiful Tuesday.